Mr. Brian Baldinger. Baldy, thanks for joining us this evening. Welcome to Sports Talk.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. It's nice to be with you, man. Good evening to everybody.
It's our pleasure to have you on. There's a ton of football talk, as you well know, to discuss, and we're glad you're here. I want to start just getting your overall thoughts on what was a wild offseason around the NFL overall. And, of course, no team made more moves and was in the news more this offseason than the Philadelphia Eagles. So what are your thoughts on the overall offseason? And of all the moves, I know you don't want to discuss all the moves that Chip Kelly made in the last 3 months, but what's your reaction to some of the major ones?
Well, I don't think we've ever had an offseason where so many big-name marquee players moved from team to team. I mean, just think about Jimmy Graham, going from New Orleans and what he's done to Seattle, and watching DeMarco Murray, leave Dallas and come to, their arch nemesis in Philadelphia, and then to see Shady McCoy, go up to Buffalo like that. I mean, we just saw, major players, major impact players change teams. And with that, we'll find out if it changes the balance of power and how quickly that may happen.
I never fail to get amazed at how much the Delaware Valley will overreact to something. And maybe this ranks one of the all-time greatest overreactions in my opinion. But that is the news, of course, this week that Tim Tebow was signed. The last 48 hours have just been amazing, with people going from one extreme to the other, one way or the other, about how good the team will be because of him, how bad the team will be. I think at worst or best, most optimistic, and the biggest stretch would be that he could be a number 2 backup, and where they use him for wildcat or two-point conversion or short yardage, but still a minimal role at best. But what's your reaction to the Tebow signing and all the reaction of the Delaware Valley football fans?
Well, I wasn't surprised that they signed him. I mean, the fact that they brought him in after being out of football for 2 years and they worked him out, I thought, once they worked him out, there's going to be something that Chip sees in him that he feels like he can use to help them win football games. And I'm not opposed to that, but I'm like you. I think there's going to be a minimal effect.
Ryan, I was going to asking you that, there's going to be a lot of question marks because of Sam Bradford not being available for most of the OTAs and maybe even the beginning of training camp. Could this have been two things? One, just an extra arm in camp, and having that extra arm in camp, does he create a little bit of a diversion from maybe attention to Sam Bradford that maybe the Eagles don't want?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I thought if they thought this was going to be such a circus that the risk and reward, they wouldn't bring him in. But I don't believe they think that. And the fact is that under Chip Kelly's practice regimen, everybody gets unbelievable amount of reps. So Tim Tebow is going to get his share of reps. Whether it's with the first team, the second team, the third team, he's going to get on the field. He's going to get a lot of chances. And, without Sam Bradford being out there all spring and for probably some of the summer, it's a great opportunity for other guys to really hone their skills.
Do you think one of the reasons it has become maybe a distraction is because the Eagles aren't really saying anything? I mean, Chip is notoriously quiet, and now it kind of everybody has their own conspiracy theory, if you will, as to what they're going to do with him. I don't think he's going to just be training camp fodder. I think they're going to give him a legitimate shot. I don't think he would do it if he was just going to be training camp fodder.
Well, they said they're bringing him in to be a quarterback. I mean, they're not trying to play him on special teams or punt protector or defense or anything. I mean, they want him to be a quarterback. And, the fact is that, Sam Bradford's coming off 2 torn ACLs. I mean, I think they feel like in this style of offense, if your quarterback is a threat to run, that offense is more dynamic. It's a better offense. And it makes the defense defend all 11 people. And there's about 4 or 5 offenses in the NFL right now that is the basis of it. If you watch Russell Wilson in Seattle, Colin Kaepernick in San Francisco, Cam Newton, I mean, there's 4 or 5 offenses in this league where when that quarterback is a threat to run, that offense is different than the other offenses in the league, and you got to defend it differently. And it forces teams to play the wide receivers one-on-one, and that's why, guys like Riley Cooper can, look really good at times. I think he's an average player, but in his offense, he gets a lot of one-on-one throws, and, when he's concentrating and catching the ball, he can be effective in this offense.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question. You're now the guy who gets to make the pick for both the Eagles and the Redskins who are listening. We have an audience down there in Washington, D.C. Who are your picks if you're in charge right now, if you could have your druthers in each team?
Well, I think that, we'll start with Washington since they're picking earlier at number 5 right now, Al. And I believe that they're going to go with RG3, even though I think there's a real schism between RG3 and Jay Gruden. But I look at the loss of Brian Orakpo, at right outside linebacker, went to Tennessee in free agency, and the injuries that he has incurred. I just think they need a real pass rusher opposite Ryan Kerrigan. And so this is a deep draft in pass rushers, and so it really depends on like who's there. But I think they're going to get a good player at number 5. My guess right now is Shane Ray will be available, and I would believe that he's the defensive end from from Missouri. But I would say right now that would be my pick. That Shane Ray, if you actually look at him physically, he's very similar to Ryan Kerrigan, size, weight, speed, and I think he can play outside linebacker as well as rush the passer from the right defensive end position. So I would say Shane Ray right now would be an excellent pick, and one that just like Kerrigan, come in and be a day one starter and impact their defense. And then at Philadelphia at number 20, I just believe, Al, that they're going to do everything they can to get Marcus Mariota. I have not wavered from that through this, since the combine when I saw him and talked to him. Marcus Mariota has come out and said that there's no question that the best fit for him in the NFL is with Philadelphia and Chip Kelly because of the style of offense, the familiarity that he has. And I think that there's a couple things that can happen. Whether it's Tennessee trading for Phillip Rivers, which certainly can happen, would take Tennessee out of the quarterback market. I don't believe the Jets are going to draft Marcus Mariota. If he falls below the Jets at number 6, I believe that the Eagles are going to do everything they can to try to make a play to go get him. Now, if they can't get Mariota because Tennessee just goes against all of their wisdom and decides to take him and he's off the board, then I think at number 20, I think there's a couple players that kind of fit their mode right now. I don't believe they like Landon Collins from Alabama, so I wouldn't take the safety right there. But I think there'll be a number of receivers that could really help this football team. I think Jalen Strong and Devin Smith. Jalen Strong from Arizona State, Devin Smith from Ohio State. Both those guys can flat out run in the 4.4s, and they've got size. And I believe this team needs a top flight wide receiver, just the way we saw Jordan Matthews come in last year and catch 67 passes. I think either one of those guys are capable of coming in and catching 65, 70 passes next year.
If Brandon Scherff is there from Iowa, would you take him at 20?
I like Brandon Scherff, Al. New sheriff in town. He comes out of Kirk Ferentz's program, who was an old offensive line coach for the Baltimore Ravens, and knows the NFL real well. And he's put a lot of guys into the NFL over the last couple of years. Brian Bulaga was a first-round pick, and then Riley Reif, and really Brandon Scherff kind of stepped right in line. They've had a kind of 3 guys in a row all play left tackle for him at a high level and then go in and play. And I think he's a good run blocker. I don't think he's a tackle, but I could see Brian Bulaga at number 20. If he's there, I don't believe he'll be there, Al, at 20, but if he's there, I can certainly see the Eagles investing in enough other offensive linemen. I don't know if you remember this, Al, but I said when Chip Kelly got this job, I said 2 things. I said the 5 most important guys on the team are going to be the offensive line, and if that's the case, then the Eagles will lead the league in rushing. And they did that the first year. They were all healthy. They had a phenomenal offensive line, played really well together, and Shady McCoy had the best year of any running back in the league 2 years ago. Now, obviously it fell apart last year. But I could see them continuing to sort of address that position. The only thing about Scherff is I just don't know really how athletic he is, Al. I'm telling you, you watch Matt Tobin run, at guard.
He's from Iowa, though, right? Matt Tobin?
Iowa kid, exactly. But he runs like a linebacker, at 300 pounds. He can really run. And you watch, Lane Johnson he runs faster than most linebackers, and Jason Peters was a tight end. And if you look at Jason Peters, Jason Kelsey, he runs better than any center in the league. These guys get out on the run, and those holes just get stretched wide open. And that's the only question I have about Scherff is, I think he's a good player. I think he'll be gone before 20, but I just don't know if the Eagles, hesitancy, they're such a size, weight, speed team. I don't know if he's fast enough to really play guard for the Eagles.
What do you think about the shot that the Eagles might go for a wide receiver, thinking in terms of maybe Beckham from Oklahoma, big, strong guy that can go up for the ball? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Dorial Green Beckham is maybe the most polarizing player in this entire draft, and here's why. He's 6'5", 6'6", he's 240 pounds. He didn't play last year. He was suspended from the University of Missouri, transferred to Oklahoma, didn't play. He came out of the draft. But 2013, he looked like Plaxico Burress with speed. I mean, he dominated the SEC, and he was phenomenal after the catch. You talk about a guy that has tremendous size and reach. He has all of that. But, he also was suspended for some really, flagrant violations.
Brian, I know the Redskins had a number of weaknesses from last year. They're looking at defensive end, outside linebacker, safety, corner. How do you see the Redskins draft developing overall? What do they target in the early rounds? And as far as safeties and corners, what names really stick out to you for either the Redskins or the Eagles, both teams needing help in the defensive back core?
Well, I would agree. Well, first of all, I think you have to realize that the Redskins made a tremendous move this offseason in hiring Scott McCloughan. Scott McCloughan was the general manager in San Francisco up until, I think, 6 years ago. He was in Seattle. He had some, individual issues that he had to wrestle with, but he's back in the business, and he is a great talent evaluator. So I think the Redskins have as sharp an eye for talent as anybody in the league. So with that being said, they have lost a lot of players. I mean, Ryan Clark and Brandon Merriweather are both gone. D'Angelo Hall didn't play much last year, was re-signed. They have a lot of holes back there right now. I think, they drafted two young corners in Bashad Breeland last year and David Amerson 2 years ago that look like they're good players. I mean, they look like they can, flat out line up, and start. And they signed Chris Culver, so they signed Deshaun Goldson, who was one of the one of the premier free agents in the league last year with Tampa Bay. And so I would say that they're probably just a safety short right now in Washington. And this is not a deep draft in safeties. What you have to do at safety right now in this business, if this goes for the Eagles as well, and a lot of other teams, the Giants don't have safeties, is you have to basically take corners, like good big corners, like Malcolm Jenkins of the Eagles was a first-round corner from Ohio State by New Orleans, and they converted him to safety. Antrell Roll was a top 10 pick out of Miami. In Arizona, he ended up becoming a great safety. I mean, that's what you have to do. You have to draft corners and then just kind of project them. And that's how you have to kind of find these guys, because they got to be able to cover. And so, if I look at, the safety class, I think there's a couple guys that can do that right now. I just think that if you look at, a guy, at Arizona State right now, like Demarius Randall is a guy that when you watch him play, he covers the slot receivers the whole game, man to man. I mean, that's what you're kind of looking for. But yet, he's 200 pounds, he's 5'11". He's got enough size to hit you and to maybe cover the deep center field. So that would be a guy maybe in the second round that you would certainly take a look at.
All right. Before we let you go, Redskins have an option on May 3rd. They have to decide whether to exercise RG3's option for 2016, which would kick in for $16.5 million. What would you do, and what do you think the Redskins are going to do? Pick up his option, let him play it out, and try to re-sign him after the year, or try to work out an extension with him?
I think that's it's a real dilemma. I actually would be surprised after the last 2 years that they're going to pick it up right now. I think they're going to let him play it out, and if he has a great year and they can kind of fix his mechanics and get him back to somewhat of the player he was when he was Rookie of the Year 3 years ago, I think then they'll have to figure out the money then. But I don't think they're going to throw him an extra year right now just based on the contract in the situation he's in right now, because I think there's a lot of people in Washington that don't feel like he can actually play quarterback in the NFL at a high level.